All right, so hello everybody, welcome. My name's Tony Zahler. I'm the lead application developer for Century College. I've been with Century for about 8 years. Yeah.
And I'm Meghan Hatalla. I'm the web presence manager at Century College. I've been in the role for just over a year. Prior to that, though, I worked as the IT training and communication specialist for a year and a half or so.
So how many people here actually work in higher ed? Is everybody? Most? Yeah. Anybody doing a redesign coming up, or that's what you're kind of here for? You're looking? Who's all on Drupal? Sorry. Yeah, we talked about that. So basically, what's this session about? I thought I could just quick outline it a little bit. We're here to talk about our most recent experience with the web redesign and our switch to Drupal. So this isn't just about Drupal, this is kind of about our whole process and all the ins and outs to it, why we chose Drupal, how we proceeded, kind of the mistakes that we made, how we fixed them, tools that we use, content strategy, user experience, testing, and overall timeline and stuff. So this is kind of a high-level overview. It's not a tech talk. Is it geared for higher ed people? Sure. But I think other folks can get some out of it too, and just seeing kind of the whole process, whether you're in higher ed doing a redesign, or if you're a company looking to pick up higher ed clients, you can kind of see some of the quirky things that higher ed has to deal with, because there are a few. We're an interesting bunch. So also this session we like to look at it is kind of free-flowing, so if you have questions along the way, please don't hesitate to ask or throw in a comment or whatnot, throw stuff at us, whatever you like. So, yeah, so interject anytime. Where's the...
I have it.
Oh.
So you can use the space bar.
I don't know. It's got a red thing. Go.
All right. All right, so Century College, if you're not from the area, is located in White Bear Lake, Minnesota, which is just a little bit north, so the little Drupal icon is where we are approximately. And then White Bear Lake is just a little northeast. So we serve right around 10,000 students, kind of ebbing and flowing over the years. We have 700 employees. There are 2 campuses, an east and a west. Don't think of it as like U of M, east and west. It's like divided by a highway, not a river. And then our web team is 4 people, which half of us are here today.
In that 4 people, 3 of them are marketing and 1's IT. Formerly, we used to have a few extra developers. That's why my title is lead application developer. Now I'm the only one, so I'm just leading myself, I guess. But
and then the other members that we're including in our web team are myself. We have a web content manager, and then we include the marketing manager because
he actually does do work on the site. Yeah, so we should include him. So we have a small team. So just a quick background on Century. This is our old website from 2010. We launched that one. That was not responsive, not really mobile friendly. We actually threw up a mobile site per se, that you could go to when you attached it with a mobile device, and just to get us by, and didn't work so great. So back in 2007, we did a whole navigation architecture redo, and that's what you see up here, that top level navigation. But when we came to the point, I don't know, in 2014, we're saying, we need a site that's mobile friendly. It's super necessary today, obviously. And then we needed a CMS. We're a .NET shop. Excuse me. So because I'm a .NET developer by trade, I'm not a PHP guy. I'm not, I don't know Drupal at all, or I didn't. I mean, I do now, but. So we needed this new CMS because our old one was horrible. We needed a mobile responsive site, and we needed new navigation. So we had to do a whole navigation re-architecture, which was a big process in itself. Our site address is right there if you want to see the site as it is now. It's similar. We wanted to keep things kind of feeling the same because we were completely changing the navigation on everybody, and we didn't want to scare them. Plus, it was a fairly clean design. We wanted to keep that kind of clean design, but we wanted to make it obviously responsive, and we wanted to make it a little more friendly and dynamic. So this is, I'm not going to go through each one of these, but this is our kind of process workflow that we had to go through. Basically what it says is we did lots of research. Then we had to get approvals, and then we had to get approval. Then we had to get some more approvals. Then we had to get informal approvals from the campus constituents. Communication and a lot more communication. We wanted to be very transparent with this process. We kind of got bit a few times in the past where the community thought, hey, you guys just did this and you didn't tell us about it. So we spent probably about 6 months prior to even really doing any of the work, just talking about it to people and kind of doing a lot of research to find out what everybody wanted so that everybody could be happy at the end. Were they?
Everybody knows.
One piece that we did in here that's kind of different from anybody else's redesign process is we decided to create and hire a new position, which is how we were lucky enough to get Meg on board. The way we looked at it, we really wanted, in order to be successful, we wanted to and make the community happy. We needed somebody who was going to be 100% every day looking at that website and keeping it alive. So that's what Meg was brought on to do. So, as we were kind of chatting just beforehand, we looked at a lot of CMSs. We ended up going with Drupal, and we ended up going with Acquia for our hosting. So I'll talk a little bit about that. We looked at a lot of the big paid options like Sitecore, Cascade Server, Savvy, or some other ones, Ectron, Sitefinity. Some of those, like Sitecore, can get up to about $100,000 plus a yearly maintenance, license fee, which is expensive. So of course we decided to look at some free options as well. So we looked at Joomla, we looked at WordPress, we looked at Umbraco, and then of course Drupal, which is what we ended up selecting. And really the selection process was my recommendation to our web committee and to the executive cabinet, and they said, yeah, it sounds great, and we went for it. But why Drupal? It's awesome. We really enjoy it. I mean, I was a little afraid, kind of in the middle. I'm like, gosh, I hope I made the right choice. This is, kind of confusing at the beginning. But now that we're in it, I really enjoy the product, and I think everybody on the team likes it, and our contributors are really into it as well. Some interesting facts that I picked up. 27% of all .edu sites globally are on Drupal. So that's pretty impressive. That was a big sales point for me moving into Drupal.
How many was it?
What's that?
How many was that?
27% of all .edu sites globally. 71 out of 100 of the top universities globally are also on Drupal. So, interesting numbers. We also liked the fact that it was open source and that there was such a good active community. I mean, that was huge. I know I could run in and I could buy support options from, various people, or, go to some consultants and say, you got to teach me this, or I could sit for hours on Drupalize Me and watch videos. But knowing that there was always that community that I could reach out to was a big selling point for us. And then, of course, Drupal is free, and as Meg likes to say,
Free like a puppy.
So,
And then Acquia.
what's that?
Why Acquia?
Right. Well, first we were used to be on-prem for everything, so we decided that the cloud hosting option was better just for availability and security, and long term there's a cost savings for us. I mean, the amount of money that we spend on servers and maintenance and upkeep and employees to run it just ended up working out a little better to have Acquia take care of it for us. So our two choices were, of course, Acquia and Pantheon. We interviewed both. I love both companies. Having worked with Acquia now for over a year, they're a great company. I've also spent a lot of time talking with Pantheon. And I also like to say that Pantheon does throw a very killer party at DrupalCon. So if you ever go to DrupalCon, go to the Pantheon party. It's really fun. But Acquia was just really our best choice, just for this kind of support options and stuff that they had for us. Take it, man.
So then moving over kind of more to my role and looking at more of like the strategy and everything else that's going to help us get through this process. We started out by creating this kind of guiding principles document. So what that basically answered is, what are we trying to achieve with this redesign? And sometimes like the best answers are the most obvious. I can't remember, I think that's the saying, right? Like Occam's razor or something. But basically our goals are to engage and enroll potential students and then keep our current students for as long as we can, 2 years, so we don't have, a really long, student pipeline for that sort of a thing. And then also shaping brand perception with all audiences, so with our alumni, our foundation, the community, all these different people who kind of come together to create the campus or make the campus what it is. And then, of course, having a consistent, responsive web experience. So Tony mentioned on the previous site there wasn't that, or there wasn't a responsive component. There was kind of like a little app that was created at some point, but it wasn't very popular. So that was basically what we were trying to accomplish. So what do we not want? Essentially, we didn't want the old site. So there was very unstructured navigation components to it. So if you saw, or if you noticed when we had the screenshot up of the old site, the first two headings were future students and current students. And so over time, people came forward and they were like, well, this actually really applies to current students, not just future students. So if you looked at the navigations, or like the second tier navigations, they were basically identical and they both had like 40 things on them. So
Not a scrolling.
Not kidding. And then along with that, we also needed to have cleaner content. There were 40 some people who had access to the website to edit content, and varying levels of changes and things like that were happening across the whole thing, and there wasn't any oversight around that.
And there really wasn't like a one voice, and I think a website today really needs to have a voice,
Exactly. And there were, what were we saying, like 2,500
2,500 pages on the site when we started this, and then we ended up at, bless you,
Less than 300.
yeah, so
I don't know.
that's
Spoiler alert.
streamlining.
And then finally, in a lot of the user research that we had done, surveys, interviews, focus groups, things like that, one of the things that we kept hearing is that the design just felt really heavy. Like it just really felt weighty to people. So that was the final thing that we were trying to get around there. So we contracted with a local design agency, Rocket 55, who created some design templates and shot over some code and things like that, so Tony could start working on Drupalizing everything. And we had a bunch of feedback exhibitions where we just had the community come into a computer lab. We created this kind of Prezi for them to walk them through the site. Rocket 55 did create a staging site for us, but the links obviously weren't live or didn't go anywhere. A lot of the content was just lorem ipsum.
Mm-hmm.
So anyone who works in higher ed knows that if you put that in front of faculty or anybody, they're just like, what is this?
Why are you talking in a different language on here? Where's the English version?
Yeah, so we really wanted to control their experience as they went through this kind of initial impression of the site. And we were also combating this previous perception that came up in 2007. Is that the last redesign? 10 years ago?
That was the major one. The rebrand was in 2010. But yeah, 2007 was the...
Where they got to vote on...
Yeah.
There was something in the past where they were able to vote on designs for the site. And so we just kind of wanted to get around that web design doesn't really work that way anymore. That's why we do a lot of research. That's why we do all these things kind of up front to arrive at a design that makes sense, that works well for people. So pulling in a quote from Steve Jobs that it's really about how the design works and not necessarily what it feels like or anything like that. So phase 2, content strategy and user experience. And I'll just point out here, if you're paying attention, on the side here we have this kind of timeline running. So we were working on these things, obviously, like well before May. But this is just to kind of give you an idea of where we really started to like utilize these things and kind of like start doing more of the heavy hitting with them and actually like implementing some of the information we came up with.
And that's 2015, so.
Right, not this year. And I don't know if we said this earlier, but our original target launch date was October 20th, sometime in October. So we're getting close to it, right? But the major artifacts that we put together to kind of like inform our strategy overall, lots of user testing, lots of research, creating user journeys and scenarios. That was incredibly helpful as we went through and worked on the information architecture, just because once you have an idea of how your different audiences are going to use the site, you know, like, okay, so this content should be here, this should be structured this way. And then when you're working in something like Drupal, it's also really helpful or really informative to creating your taxonomy, because you know your audiences, you know their like functions and things like that. Moving over, we did a content audit analysis and assessment, which I'll talk through in the next slide. And then finally, a competitive and gap analysis. So competitive analysis, for anyone who doesn't know, is where you essentially look at other people's websites and kind of figure out some sort of a rubric based on like what you like, what you don't like, what's helpful, what's not helpful. And then the gap analysis is where you kind of turn it inwards onto your own site and say, oh, okay, we're missing these different things. So our content audit, glorious spreadsheet, which you like spreadsheets, looks amazing. If you don't, you're probably like wiggling in your seat a little bit. So our audit, we essentially went through every single page on the website. So
2,500 of them.
and built a really big spreadsheet around it. What we did is just included the fields that we thought were really necessary. If you Google content audit, you'll find like a million different templates that you can use, and a lot of the fields aren't necessary to higher ed or whatever it is you're trying to do. So we assigned an ID to every page so we could, obviously know where it is. The navigation, so who or like where it lies within the overall structure. The department owner, so you can see that right here if it was marketing, if it was admissions, like who or where the subject matter expert would reside for that. Who the author was or who the assigned content coordinator was. A basic description, like what is this even for, the URL, and then just any comments that need to go along with it. And I also did, you can tell, a lot of color coordination that goes along with it, which you don't have to do, but I just like it. And then the user experience portion. So again, I won't talk through this because I think everybody probably has a good idea for what UX is. I think one of the only challenges we maybe had was trying to make a case for UX and trying to get like just a teeny tiny little budget for it so we could do like some more robust testing. And a really great example that I found online, this is from, can't think of her name now, do I have it in my notes? Her blog is right here, it's User Experience Rocks. She's really famous, I can't think of her name. But so one of her examples that she uses to explain user experience to people is to think of like a product that you really love. So if it's a bicycle, that there are two types of people that created that bicycle, or two types of effort that went into it. So the first is like the UI, or the product designer. So they're the ones who make sure that like the pedals are of good quality and they're like screwed in tight enough that you don't fly off the bike. And then the user experience is the one who makes it into something that you love. So they choose like, I don't know, like the really nice seats or, the colors or things like that. So kind of like those more intangible kind of qualities. So that's how we kind of explain user experience to a lot of our constituency to get them on board with that whole process. Some of the tools, or some tools for your toolkit that we use that were really, really helpful. Gather content. If you were in Carrie Pepe's presentation yesterday, she talked about gather content as well. Basically what we used it to do is replicate our site structure. And we didn't know for sure that it was going to work as well as it did, but I think Tony can attest to it too. We were both a little dubious about it, but it worked amazingly well.
Anytime you hear about a product where they say, oh, you just put all your information in here and then click a button and it just easily integrates it all, just pushes it all up. I get nervous as an IT person because I've been through this so many times where you get a vendor who says, oh yeah, no, we're ready to roll. All you got to do is just click the button and we're good, and it never works like that.
No, it always works now.
Right. This one worked pretty good, so we're happy with it.
Right. So gather content was really awesome for us. And then Optimal Workshop, which is a resource online. It's free to a point. So you get, I think it's 10 or 20 for like responses for free, depending on the test that you want to administer. And then you have to pay for more. But they have pretty awesome reporting and result distillation. And they allow for tree testing, card sorting, and I think first click response. So there's 3 major ones that you can just like set up online, and then they'll do everything. You just send it out to your users for them to respond to. And then they have some more robust packages that were way out of our price range. So.
We also use, later on, we use things like Trello in Basecamp to do some communication with our consultants that we picked up later on, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah.
And then there was, of course, all the other freebie online tools, you know, for like accessibility and things like that that we used later on in the process.
For sure. So this quote kind of illustrates my approach to content strategy as a whole. So as we mentioned earlier, there were over 40 people who had access to the site and were making all these different changes. And for me, coming into the role, and Tony and I discussed this earlier after we gave you the higher ed summit, and realized we're kind of control freaks when it comes to the site.
Yeah.
But so 40 to me just sounded like way too many. And so we took the steps to reduce that down to 6. So we have 6
Kind of
coordinators. Huh?
Kind of 7.
Kind of 7.
Isn't Rondi? Yes.
The library insisted on having their own as well, even though they're the library. So we have 7-ish, 6.5 content coordinators. And so they were selected based on just kind of their roles. So they oversee several different areas. And it's nice in a sense because one of the big things that people said originally was that, well, we need somebody in financial aid to write our content because nobody else will understand it. And we're like, no, that's good because they'll write it in a way that makes it understandable. So that worked out in our favor, and it was a good kind of tool as we battled that. I don't know, we didn't have a ton of pushback against that.
No, I think people were ready for it. I mean, they knew the old model really wasn't working, where we were having 35, 40 people or whatever trying to do it. Because what we ran into is we give them a quick training, they'd walk away, they wouldn't do anything for a month or 2, and then all of a sudden they would need to go jump in and do something. Well, of course, you forget it after that. You know, you don't remember the training. These weren't super techie IT people. These were people who worked in each individual department, and so I mean, I think we were kind of ready for that. And another big piece was that when we did streamline it down to those 6, 7 people, this was we actually rewrote their position descriptions. We made it a part of their job and gave them a percentage. I think they get like 10% of their job is set for working on the website. So this is actually something that's, you know, kind of tangible. It's something they can put on their resume, and these people were pretty excited about it. And the ones that we've selected have been doing a great job and actually doing it on a regular basis and getting that content.
Yeah, and we did a focus group with the content court, or the 40, or various interviews and things like that, so that also kind of helped make the case for it, because a lot of them said exactly what Tony said. They went into the CMS once a month, maybe once every 2 months, and just based on like their workloads and everything, that really helped kind of push that idea forward.
All right.
Back to Tony.
So here we get to kind of the development portion of things. And we're getting closer to our October deadline date. And I'm very frightened. Okay. So, you know, the things that I needed to accomplish was theming. Kind of the applications and the little goodies, doing like the different modules that we need to do, you know, whatever we need to do, you know, setting up all the views and creating and connecting external APIs. So I'm going to explain that really quick. We decided to do something a little different. We didn't want to connect our SQL databases that we have on-prem directly to Drupal or to our website. We wanted to separate those for security reasons. So no matter what anybody does, they can't ever get to our sensitive data. And the way we did that is I set up APIs. So I have the real basic APIs. They pop out some XMLs. Drupal then comes in picks up those XMLs, puts them in the website on schedule, formats, and displays, right? So we're doing that with our class cancellations and our directory currently. In the future, we're looking to do a couple other things with it as well, but those were our kind of immediate need that we needed to fulfill. And I know my CIO was really happy when I said, we're not connecting at all. So, you know, we work for MINSCU, which is a Minnesota State College and University system, and we've had a few little security things kind of happen. Made everybody a little nervous, so that's been really kind of on our forefront, on our minds right now. How do we secure and protect our websites? And this was one way to do it. Just keep those hackers and stuff away from our sensitive data. So anything that we push up to our site is non-sensitive data, right? So that was kind of a big portion. So that's just giving the overview. So now, looking at all what needed to be done and looking at where we were, I think we were in about August at this time. I started going, you know, we're going to miss our deadline. I don't miss deadlines. That really makes me upset. So, but I was going to. So it was time to kind of go forward and there we go. We were having some ITS staffing issues at the time. This is me making my excuses, right? So we were having some IT staffing issues at the time that where I was having to fill in and do a lot of things. We lost a SharePoint administrator. We lost one of our directors, so I was doing a lot more project management. I was taking care of the SharePoint site. I was, you know, doing this and that. And, you know, if you work in higher ed right now, you know, at least for a lot of us, it's a little tight, you know, and we're not backfilling positions and stuff, you know. Then there was the insufficient base knowledge that I had on Drupal, which was a lot. I mean, I didn't know anything about it. I worked a little bit in WordPress in the past, so I had this kind of idea that, oh, you know what? I'm an experienced .NET developer. I've been doing this. I've been building websites. Been a web developer since the 90s, you know, since we first started doing this. Excuse me. So this is why, I wanted to talk about learning. So kind of learning Drupal, you know, is this kind of big rabbit hole that you fall down once you start trying to look at what you need to do. And it's like, okay, well, I need to learn this. Well, in order to do this, I need to learn this, this, and this. So you know, I was just sitting there watching videos and, you know, talking to people and trying to get as much info as I could, but I knew that we weren't going to hit this deadline. There was no way I was going to theme it. I was going to do all these applications, make these APIs, connect them all, push it all up within 2 months at the time. I was like, there's just no way. So, so we made a new deadline. A new deadline was December 21st, so we had an extra couple months more now. So at this point, I have now gotten approval to push that deadline out. So we start that kind of big push where we start looking at, okay, how are we going to do this? We have an extra couple months. It was like September at the time, and we decided we needed help. We needed help really bad. So this is going to be a shameless plug. Dan's going to like this. Electric Citizen. We basically went to them with this kind of plea of help. So interesting story is we were at DrupalCon LA, and we were all done. It was a great conference, met a lot of good people, but we were waiting for the airplane, sitting there, and Tim was standing next to me, and he had his little Drupal bag, so we started talking about the thing, found out where he worked, and he answered some questions for me, and you know, and gave us some really good advice, which was super helpful. And I remembered that as I had walked away from there. And so when we decided we need help, they were the first person, you know, or first company we decided to call. So we got approval to work with Electric Citizen, which was great. So we had to do this fast. Now again, working higher ed, nothing ever moves fast, right? So we had to get that contract pushed through, and that was really hard because we needed to get going. We had this date that we had to hit. We didn't have time to, we couldn't do an RFP. We had to find ways to get this done. So we ended up, breaking the kind of project up into pieces to try to help us push through. And executive was backing us on it because they also needed the site up by December. So we ended up getting it all pushed through. We started work in, I don't know, I think it was mid-October. It took about 4 weeks to get the basic site set up, so that's all themed, kind of everything in place so we could start pushing content. So then we used gather content to push that content up. Then we, it's not perfect. It's not going to push it up and it's going to be, oh, it's magic, it's all done. Then we had to go back through page by page and edit, and then add imagery, kind of get all that going. Then we did, we did a lot of layout editing and stuff, working with Electric Citizen really close to, kind of get the kind of page templates that we need to have set up. We ran a bunch of training sessions for those content contributors. Do you want to talk a little about the training sessions? I mean, we did like a workshop-y thing.
Yeah, we did about 1 week and 10 hours, so 2 hours in the morning, where we really focused on, like, obviously how to use the CMS. And then we talked a little bit about, like, user experience and content strategy. So just kind of started to build up that knowledge base for them. We talked a little bit about, like, analytics, and we created reports that are sent to them automatically on their pages. So it's just like how many views they're getting, what people are searching for to get there, that sort of stuff. So that's been kind of ongoing. So like once a month we'll meet up again and just kind of like talk about issues they have, anything along those lines. And then if they have specific questions, then we shoot them up to wherever it needs to go and try to make things a little bit easier for them.
Mm-hmm. I know I was talking to the folks at U of M, and they were talking about training options and, kind of what, we were talking about what we all did. And now granted the U of M's just a tad bigger than we are at Century, but this was I thought was a great way to do it, because basically we got the people in there, they had these little workshops, they got to kind of do it all hands-on, and then when they left, they had projects to do. They had things that they had to do right away, so they would not forget how to do this, because there was going to be this kind of time period where the site's not live. Maybe I have all my content edited, now I have to wait until, the end of December to really get in and start doing it again. So having that kind of ongoing work that they had to do was really helpful.
Right, so always save stuff for them, like applying headers and
right.
Things like that.
So then we completed the APIs, we connected them, and then we just did a lot of testing. Testing some more to make sure that we were, ready for this launch. And really, we went into this knowing that, talking with the folks at Electric Citizen, saying, okay, I know we have literally 2 months to get this all done. If we can just get it 80%, we'll be happy. So that was our goal. We wanted the site so that you wouldn't really know that it wasn't completed, but there was that little 20% that we, needed to kind of work on in the background to finish it up at the end. But really, when we got to the end, we were probably at least a good, I would say 90%, maybe even 95%. I mean, they rocked, so they really did a good job helping us, and so did our content contributors.
So the communication plan, so the other big part that Tony talked about in the beginning, along with getting approvals. So we launched a pretty intensive communication plan. Obviously, early on we did the feedback exhibitions way back in like April, and then we sent out kind of periodic updates through our campus bulletin, which is like our little newsletter kind of a thing. So people theoretically had an idea of what was happening, and then as we were gearing up to actually launch, we had a lot more to do, of course. So this included emails that were super targeted to people. So there were just general campus things that went out, but then also emails that focused on like URLs. So making sure to get in touch with admissions and saying like all of your printed materials, like look at the URLs on those because they're probably going to change. And if you have any short URLs or anything like that that's going to need to, be saved, or we're going to need to make redirects or things like that, then send those along too. Making sure that faculty were aware of this before leaving for the winter, or for the
Summer.
No,
No,
winter.
summer. Sorry.
before they left for winter break to update their D2L courses, which is our learning management system. So lots of targeted communication like that. Posters, you can see a couple of examples of your monitor slides. So we have campus monitors, so that was there. The personal communication to specific constituencies, I gave the example of talking to admissions specifically, and then other departments that needed it. Social channels, basically anywhere and everywhere that we could like communicate that this was happening, that the website's changing, don't freak out, like just get used to it. We also released it to the Century community early as well. How early was that, like a week or 2 weeks?
It was about, I think it was just a week.
It was about a week, and we released it out to primarily the frontline staff, the people who are answering questions for students. So if somebody's calling, they know like how to direct them to find different things, and then also to say like, did we miss anything? Or are you seeing anything that's super weird or anything like that?
We also, even after we launched, we did keep a link to the old site up for, I don't know, probably what, 3 months maybe?
Longer
3-4
than we
months.
initially intended
Right.
to.
But a lot of people, you know, creatures of habit in higher ed, they really wanted to keep going to that old site, so we were letting them kind of slowly transition. And again, we had to communicate the date that we were going to shut that off and move forward. And you know, and that was actually, it was a good time to be able to say, people could come to us and say, you know, I can't find this, I can't find this, and we found stuff that we missed. I mean, that was, like we said, it was a website with 2,500 pages, so there was a, you know, of course there was a few things that we missed here and there, or links that needed redirects, and you know, coming from a site that did not have friendly URLs, so.
And we were dealing with, so the site, when it was originally designed, there was no like employee portal or no intranet, and that kind of came about, I don't know, when was SharePoint kind of implemented? 2010?
Oh, that was a little earlier,
Earlier.
probably 2009, yeah.
Okay. But, I don't know, higher ed dog years where people are just very used to how things were done like 10 years ago and still think that's the way they should be done. So the site had a ton of employee-related resources, so they got through their timesheet without having to log into the portal and things like that. So that was another kind of education that we had to go through with people, is if you're emailing us saying, well, we can't get to our timesheets anymore. We're like, actually, you can. And it's way better this way because it's just single sign-on.
Yep.
So making those cases, and then that actually fed really well into like gaining kind of informal research for that redesign, which is happening right now. So we did public site last year. This year we're doing our intranet. Post-launch, so how are we doing with that? And we sent this out probably a little earlier than we should have. We started surveying people in late January just to get some ideas on what they were thinking. So employee feedback is in green, students are in the middle, and then the average is at the end there. So for the most part, we have some pretty clear things, like it's not really, it's pretty consistent between these people. It was more in their individual feedback that we got more information about what they were liking and what they weren't liking. So for students, you can see they're kind of consistently a little higher than employees for the most part. One big piece of research that we found is that for logins, like, so you know, anyone who works in higher ed students care about their email, getting to the learning management system, which for us is D2L, and registering for classes when they need to, right? Like those are probably the three main things. And before, the logins for all those things were kind of like spread around the site. And so we changed it to just like a single login in the top corner. So they're absolutely bonkers over that. Mm-hmm. And then we also added a student page, which has like kind of a one-stop, so all the resources that they would need in one place, along with an academic calendar on the side with dates that they can add to their device. So those two things were like the things that we heard repeatedly over and over that they really loved.
I think the reason why the employee piece was a little bit lower in here is because they were having, like you mentioned earlier, we got rid of a lot of the employee resources that were on the external site, and you know, kind of were forcing them to go train them in a new way to get to that information in a better way. Mm-hmm. So I think that hurt. Like you said, I think we did this a little early, but I was just happy to see that the students were happy, because to me, number one, that's what's important for an external site. There are prospects, there are students. We should do what we need to do to make them happy. So,
Exactly.
and then mobile. I mean, that was one of the biggest things I heard back from students was the fact that they can access everything via mobile and it works. And if you look at the analytics, the amount of mobile users using our site now, I mean, it's skyrocketed. So.
Definitely. So yeah, and I mean, to be honest, like for students, I think we had 600 to 800 responses for the survey as a whole, and for employees, out of our 700, there were like 20.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of a select few who were unhappy. But our analytics kind of show a better story, or a little bit of a different story. We did actually pull more recent numbers. We were going to go for the past month, but I don't know, higher ed visits in the summer aren't as impressive as spring numbers, so we decided to keep this from the last time we did this presentation. So you can see pretty dramatic increases or advancements made for, as a whole, especially like bounce rate, which is one of my favorites. I had a conversation with my old boss. I used to work at Metro State, and now he works for a higher ed consulting firm. And he was like, well, what's going to be your target bounce rate? I'm like, I want to be under 25%. And he was like, psh, that's impossible. So, haha.
You know, that, you know, of course, attributes to, I think, the site's designed really well. I think the friendly URLs are huge. I think just the way we redid the navigation and just the way Drupal runs it, just rocked it out. So,
Yeah. So,
best picture ever.
so yeah, and this is just kind of like our final kind of wrap up thought on it. So 4% of the community, maybe or maybe not, based on the 20 survey respondents who are not super happy or critical. So they'll just insist on being resistant and just very intentionally obtuse when it comes to things like, I don't know, we had somebody who claimed that they couldn't find financial aid, and I was literally like, it's under cost and financial aid.
Header, you know.
It's under, yeah. So anyways, they'll just insist on that, but 96% will really love it. So as you're going through the whole process, just really focus on finding your advocates and celebrating success. And advocates can be like actual people, they can be analytics, like the numbers that we just showed, they can be students, like anybody that you can like kind of get on your side to prove different things. And I think the other thing that I just thought of as Tony was talking about his freak out moment was that, I mean, we took like 5 minutes to kind of freak out about it, and then we got to work.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
there's always an answer or something to move forward to.
Absolutely.
So our summary points, vendors that we use that we really like, Acquia has been pretty good and helpful. Rocky 55 did our design. Talk about Electric Citizen, did like a big plug, they're amazing. Dan's here if you want to talk to him. Tools, gather content for content. Optimal workshop for user research and testing. Drupal. You should have put the Drupal icon there, Tony, not the smiley face.
You know, wasn't that fancy. 10 o'clock last night.
Communication ideas, basically everything possible. And then a single point person for consistency. So for us, that was me. So I was filtering everything and shooting it off to where it needed to go, and then able to cite other things or be able to like take up what we needed to act on and what we didn't need to act on for whatever reason.
And I would, just to go back to the whole idea behind communication, I mean, I think it's so vitally important to do that should be like 50% of your redesign should be communicating with your community. It really helped us. It helped us build the site. I mean, it helped us kind of push things forward. It helped people get excited about it. And again, we did all kinds of things. Like the marketing director and I, we went around and did presentations, like half-hour presentations to, every group that we could get our hands on at the college. The faculty groups, the different cabinets, all the committees. I think we did 18 presentations over a couple months time period, which was a lot. And then just all the focus groups. Getting and sitting down with students was huge. I mean, we did a lot of that where we'd take like Student Success Day where they were all there and they were, running around, going to all the different booths, and we'd pull them in and say, hey, you know what, I'll give you a $25 gift card to the library if you come and sit down with me, and So we did a lot of that kind of stuff where we did drawings for people to, why did we get 600 to 800 students to respond to our survey? Because we offered we did a contest,
Incentives.
Right, little incentives like that. So, I can't push that enough. That was one of the biggest reasons why we had the success that we did.
And it doesn't, don't think that you need to give away like an iPad or things like that. Like we gave away stocking hats, which were really cute, and they were I think there were only like 10 of them total. And I don't know, stocking hats are apparently super fashionable, or they were in the winter, so they were going nuts over that, so maybe that's part of it too.
Yeah.
But we did have, toward the end, like 2 weeks before launch, I was talking to somebody, or referring to some email, and they were like, oh yeah, I feel like I can't open my inbox without seeing something about the redesign. So they're annoyed, but we're like, yes. Oversaturation.
Right, it worked well.
And then miscellaneous, just look for collaboration opportunities. So like Tony talked a lot about just talking with students and getting their input.
Talking to your Drupal community.
Drupal community, yeah, so not even internally, just wherever you can get support, take advantage of it, and then just have fun, because it was really fun for us.
Yeah, it was a long process, and it did take, we spent over a year on it, but it was worth it. It was worth it to take the time, and again, because everything in higher ed moves kind of slow, I think a year was a pretty good timeline.
Yeah, and we're in a good position now to, we have a support contract with Electric Citizen, so kind of those like niche things that we've thought about as we've gone along, like our content coordinators asked if there could be like a spell check in their WYSIWYG editor, which they were able to do, and they were like gaga over it. So that was
Yeah,
really
these
cool.
little things like that, it's great. So,
Questions?
yes.
So going into this project, planning, I'm trying to think of the best way to ask the question. Did you anticipate a lot of development? Or did you anticipate just out of the box trying to take advantage of what was there?
So I thought that, because I've done things like this before, and I'm a quick study. I learn things really well myself. So I thought, I didn't think the development process would be as long as,
The ramp up process, kind of.
right, once, I just think we kind of went around that part, we didn't do that right from the start. Instead of going through a design agency like we did, because our idea was, we'll save a couple bucks. We'll go into a design agency. I could have designed it myself, but I did the last one. I didn't want to do this one, so we went to a design agency. We had them build the site for us and, code the HTML and CSS. And I figured, well, I could just take that and I should be able to theme it out and do all this stuff. But like I said earlier, it just ended up being kind of this rabbit hole of learning, and it was a lot more for me to handle. I think if we were to redo it, kind of something that we would have done to fix that mistake, instead of waiting to the last minute to go to a Drupal agency like Electric Citizen, we should have started at the beginning and found somebody to do the design and the development and get it from start to finish, and we probably would have shortened that up at least probably a good 4 months, I bet. We could have probably made that October deadline with no problem.
Yeah, just knowing what we do about how Drupal works now. It was kind of like trying to, what is it, pound a square peg in Drupal, like trying to take their design and then make it work in Drupal. But
anyone else? Yeah?
What was your single biggest blocker, your biggest headache? The one thing that was the biggest deterrent to success of your operation?
That, what I was just talking about. So where we kind of got to that point where I said, I can't get this done on deadline. I knew I could figure it out eventually, but I started looking at it like, I'm going to have to push this out till, probably April of the next year. We can do it over our spring break or something, launch it then. So that would have not added 2 months on, that would have added, 6 months to the project. So I think that was our biggest.
Yeah, how devastating that was. The marketing, or Tony told the marketing director and I that, and we were both just like, what?
So yeah, that was probably the biggest one. But like I said, it all ended up working out in the end, and it wasn't too painful at that point.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think that was probably like the biggest point where it was like, holy crap, like are we gonna be able to pull this off?
Yes, sir.
I was just gonna emphasize a point that you made earlier where you were talking about the training and that process and then getting people right into the system. That was something we didn't quite get right, but eventually we did. We kind of had to do a couple phases of training, but when we actually did initial training and then let's wait a couple months before we do anything with the system. And so we had to actually kind of reintroduce some of that training and then get people right in and working.
Mhm.
That was actually, that was crucial for getting both buy-in from those users and then just being able to give them something that they actually could do and remember at that point. So
Right.
yeah, it sounds like you guys did pretty well. We had a couple glitches in that process, but we won't.
Well, we learned our lesson because we did this for years before. Just kept doing the same thing over and over again. We'd train them, and then we'd send them off, and then they'd forget. And a year later, we're like, we got to retrain everybody again, and then they would retrain them, and that was.
But what's funny is that, I mean, it was kind of by design, but more from necessity. So we were, like Tony said, we pushed all the content out, we gathered content, and it was in the right pages, but it wasn't formatted, there weren't any pictures, it wasn't, I think it included like bullets, like really simplistic styling, but not like anything else. So, yeah, we needed them to get in there and start working on things.
We did the same thing too. We
Yeah.
kind of all hands on deck. Everybody's gonna build. We're
Yep.
doing that right now.
Yeah.
That worked.
That worked really well. Yeah, and then like we just talking about it, then it trains them at the same time. So you're getting the work done and it trains them, and that trained us. I mean, having to get in there and being pushed into this and like, okay, we gotta get going. I mean, by the time the site launched, I was pretty now comfortable with Drupal and go, oh, okay. Now I see the points are put together. Now I figured out how this all works, and I understand what this terminology is, because that was one of the things that drove me nuts with Drupal was terminology was different from what I was used to. Coming from my .NET environment or coming from WordPress. I mean, little things like we got plugin versus module. Is module a plugin? I don't know. I mean, trying to figure out all those little things. So yeah, so that was helpful.
Yeah, they were kind of like our rogue QA usability testers. They come to us and say, well, this doesn't work the way that I thought that it would work. And I'm like, oh, good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then now we're set up the way we are, that the site works great as it is, and of course after just to talk just a minute about launch. Launch went fairly well. We did it right before we went on break, which was kind of an unusual time to do it, but we thought that'll let us have a little time, where not a lot of traffic. The tough part is when the faculty come back and they go, so that's part of the whole communication piece. But launch went really well, and we discovered a few things here and there that needed to be fixed, and now we're kind of running, we're cooking along, and we're coming up with new ideas for, hey, we can do this or that, and some of it we just do ourselves, some of it we go to our consultants for a little help, and the launch was good. Any other questions? I think you guys are going to get out of here a little early.
5 minutes.
Thanks a lot.